When you think of witch trials, your mind probably jumps to Salem, Massachusetts, or perhaps the dark days of medieval Europe. Today, we're diving into a fascinating, dark, and often overlooked chapter in Canadian history, witch trials. Yes, witches in Canada. And strangely enough, laws dealing with witchcraft lingered on Canada's books until the 21st century. Join us as we uncover the often overlooked history of witches in Canada. Before we jump in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you'll never miss out on our captivating Canadian content. To understand witch trials in Canada, we need to step back into time. Witchcraft accusations were far more common in Europe in the 1500s to 1700s, often intertwined with religious, social, and cultural anxieties. Witchcraft accusations often targeted those on the margins, the widows, healers, and outsiders who lived differently. Women who used herbs or spoke too boldly could be branded as witches. Men weren't immune either. A farmer or tradesman who used charms or folk magic might be accused when luck turned sour. In times of famine, illness, or fear, suspicion needed a face, and it usually fell on the poor, the strange, or the independent. Even Indigenous healers and spiritual leaders were condemned by colonial priests as sorcerers. In truth, the accused were rarely evil, only different, and in a frightened world, difference was often enough. Canada's experience differs sharply from the dramatic episodes that we associate with the Salem or European witch hunts. The scale was small, the cases few, but they leave fascinating traces in the archival records, church documents, and legal texts. Our story begins primarily in the 17th century in the fledgling colony of New France. Life here was harsh. Settlers faced unforgiving winters, disease, conflict with Indigenous peoples, and the constant struggle for survival. In such an environment, fear and superstition could easily take root. The legal system was based on French law, which, unlike the English common law tradition, had a slightly different approach to witchcraft. Though New France, now known as Quebec, never saw mass witch hunts, suspicion was high enough that allegations of sorcery and curses against individuals appear in the Jesuit Relations and ecclesiastical archives. The judicial records of the 17th century bear a chilling mark of this fear, documenting several cases where the courts confronted alleged practitioners of the dark arts. Though the resulting punishments were generally less severe than those dealt out elsewhere, these trials reveal that the shadow of witchcraft, even in its quieter form, cast a persistent pall over the early French settlements. The earliest documented case of spiritual malice struck in 1657 with the trial of René Besnard de Beaujolais. In 1653, René Besnard, later called de Beaujolais, arrived from France and became a corporal in the garrison at Ville-Marie, which we now call Montreal. In 1656, a young woman named Marie Pontonnier arrived at the colony and soon became engaged to Pierre Guédois, a gunsmith's son. René Besnard, having been rejected as a suitor, threatened that he was a sorcerer and had cast a spell over the groom's masculinity in order to render him impotent. On August 12, 1657, Guédois and Pontonnier were married. Yet the marriage remained unconsummated and childless for a significant period. The couple believed that this condition was due to Besnard's malevolent act. On the 2nd of November, 1658, Besnard was brought before the seigneurial court of Montreal on charges of using witchcraft to cause the marriage's impotence. The court found him partially guilty of a malicious spell casting, though not fully branding him as a diabolical witch, and punished him accordingly. He was fined and then banished from Montreal. Meanwhile, on August 31st, 1660, after 3 years of non-consummation of the marriage, the Bishop of Quebec declared the marriage of Guédois and Pontigny null on account of perpetual impotence caused by malefice. After exile, René Besnard relocated to the Trois-Rivières region and on February 2, 1661, married a widow, Marie Cédillo, and fathered 6 children. Besnard became a landowner, and even today in Trois-Rivières there is a street named Rue Bourgeois referencing his name. More than 2 decades later, in 1682, the chilling specter of witchcraft again descended upon Montreal, targeting Anne Lamarque, an independent innkeeper. Anne Lamarque was born in 1649 in Saint-Colombe, near Bordeaux, France. She came to New France, and by around 1672, she and her husband Charles Testard were settled in Montreal. Anne and her husband ran a tavern that became popular with a wide spectrum of patrons: soldiers, voyageurs, merchants, and locals. The establishment's lively reputation and Anne's relative independence as a woman who could read and write and run a business drew scrutiny. By 1682, charges were formally made against her. Neighbors and witnesses alleged that she owned a book of magic or spells from which she concocted love charms and potions to maintain or attract clients. She was also accused of adultery, running a house of debauchery, having immoral liaisons, and neglecting religious duties. Her husband himself testified, accusing his own wife of magic, adultery, and bringing shame to the community. The clerical authorities were pressed to act, and a formal accusation occurred on the 17th of June, 1682. At trial, Anne defended herself by saying that the alleged magic book was not a grimoire, but a treatise on herbs and medicine. In the end, due to her social connections and patronage, she was acquitted, avoiding banishment and severe punishment. She died a few years later at about age 37. This case shows how women who operated businesses, interacted across social classes, or defied strict moral norms could become vulnerable to accusations of supernatural wrongdoing. Perhaps the most unsettling event occurred in the 1660s with the plight of Barbe Allais. She was about 16 years old and worked as a domestic servant in a manor house near Quebec City. A local miller and recent immigrant named Danielle Vieux asked for her hand in marriage, but Barbe refused. It was rumored that Vieux was angry because Allais had refused his proposal, filling the common belief that witches were often motivated by spite. Soon afterwards, strange phenomena began to be reported in the household where Barbe lived. Stones were seen to fly across the rooms, objects moved seemingly on their own, strange noises echoed. One missionary, Paul Ragueneau, wrote, "The girl's home was so infested that stones were flying from all sides, thrown by invisible hands, with the noise and a force as great as if they had been launched by a mighty arm." Barbe herself began to claim that demons appeared to her in many shapes, men, women, beasts, children, and at some points the demons spoke through her mouth, though not in her own voice. These events alarmed the religious and civil authorities. The bishop, François Laval, became involved and ordered exorcisms. The exorcisms failed, and the phenomena persisted. Barbe was transferred to the Hôtel Dieu hospital convent under the care of nuns reputed to have experience with demonic cases, but her torments continued for some time. Meanwhile, Daniel Vieux was accused of being the cause of Allie's possession, the jilted suitor who used diabolical arts to inflict torment on her. He was arrested, tried, and executed in 1661. He was charged not solely for witchcraft, but also as a relapsed heretic, blasphemer, and profanator of sacraments. After roughly 2 years of torment, Barbe's condition was said to have improved. The exorcisms and spiritual interventions succeeded. Barbe was married in 1670 to Jean Carrier and lived a relatively normal life until her death in 1696. Now let us turn our eyes from the shores of New France and fix our gaze upon Acadia, where the early frost of suspicion settled heavily in 1684. In the summer of 1684, the French Acadian settlement of Beaubassin, a small farming village at the head of the Bay of Fundy, was tense and restless. A new settler had arrived, Jean Campagna, a man of uncertain origin. He lived alone, repaired tools, and traded with the locals, but he did not attend Mass often, and he muttered to himself while he was working. When livestock began to die and a fever swept through the settlement, suspicion took an aim at the outsider. In November of 1684, neighbors claimed strange things happened near Campagna's home. Milk curdled overnight, oxen refused to plow, and a farmer's son fell into fits. Under French colonial law, communities were urged to report witchcraft to the church and to royal officials. A parish clerk compiled depositions from more than a dozen villagers, including women who swore they had seen Campagna whispering over sick animals. The record described him as a man possessed of evil influence. These statements were forwarded to the Chenessoise of Acadia and eventually to Quebec's Superior Council, the colony's highest court. Campagna was taken in chains to Quebec City in early 1685. There, magistrates questioned him for months. According to surviving judicial summaries, no physical evidence of sorcery was found, only fear and hearsay. The Jesuit chroniclers who later commented on the case noted how quickly the imagination of the people in distant parishes turned misfortune into witchcraft. The trial revealed deep anxieties within the Acadian society. Disease, isolation, and famine left communities desperate for explanations. Campagna's quiet demeanor and outsider status made him the perfect scapegoat. After lengthy interrogation, Campagna was acquitted. The judges ruled that no proof of diabolical commerce existed, and that the accusation stemmed from ignorance and fear. He was released and allowed to return to Beaubassin, but not to peace. When he came home, his neighbors avoided him. No one would buy his wares or share a table. His property was vandalized, and his name entered local lore as the Sorcerer of Beaubassin. Historians suggested Campagna eventually left the region, disappearing from the records sometime after 1686. The shift from French to British rule in Quebec did not quiet the fears of dark magic. The classic English statute, the Witchcraft Act 1736, was held to apply in Canada via colonial importation. This change produced one of Canada's most enduring and chilling figures of colonial dread, Marie-Joseph de Corriveau, infamously known as Le Corriveau. The winter of 1763 was bitter in the parish of Saint-Vallier, near Quebec City. Marie-Joseph de Corriveau was 39, twice married, and the daughter of a farmer. Her first husband had died young. Her second, Louis-Étienne Dodier, was known for drink and cruelty. One January morning, Dodier was found dead in the barn, his skull crushed. At first, neighbors thought a horse had kicked him, but rumors spread quickly. Le Courreveau had hated her husband. When authorities found blood splatter inconsistent with the accident, suspicion turned towards her and her father, Joseph. By 1763, New France had fallen to Britain, and as previously mentioned, the new rulers imposed English military law on the French population. The Courreveau case became one of the first major tests of that system. Marie Josephte and her father were arrested by order of General James Murray, governor of Quebec. They were tried before a British military court-martial, a rare proceeding for civilians. At the first trial, Joseph Courreveau confessed under pressure that he alone had murdered Dodier. He was sentenced to hang, but whispers persisted. Witnesses claimed Marie Josephte had poured scalding water on her husband, that she had plotted his death for months. Before Joseph's execution, the authorities re-examined the case. Under questioning, he changed his story, saying that his daughter was the real killer and he had only helped her to hide the body. A second court-martial convened in April 1763. 13 British officers presided, with interpreters translating for French witnesses. The trial record, still preserved in London and Quebec, details calm, chilling testimony. Marie Josephte had struck her husband in his sleep with an axe, then begged her father to help cover the crime. The verdict was swift: guilty of murder. She was sentenced to death by hanging, her body to be displayed publicly in irons for the terror of others. On April 18, 1763, Marie Josephte Courreveau was executed on the Plains of Abraham. Afterwards, her corpse was locked in an iron cage and suspended at a crossroads near Léveillé, a grim warning visible for miles. Travelers soon claimed her eyes glowed in the moonlight. Horses balked near the cage. Some said they heard sobbing through the fog. Within weeks, Le Courreveau became a symbol of witchcraft, vengeance, and feminine rebellion, a dark legend. Her cage remained hanging for 5 weeks before the church demanded its removal. The iron cage, rediscovered in 1849, now rests in the Musée de la Civilisation in Quebec City, a relic of superstition and colonial justice. By the late 18th century, the belief in witchcraft began to wane as the Age of Enlightenment ushered in rational thought and scientific inquiry. The decline of religious zeal and the rise of secularism contributed to the growing skepticism towards witchcraft accusations. Legal reforms and changing societal attitudes further diminished the prevalence of witch trials in Canada. But even as popular belief in literal spellcasting witches declined, witchcraft still found itself in Canadian law. Section 365 of the Criminal Code of Canada was imported from a British statute and introduced in 1892. Over time, its original religious underpinning was replaced by a fraud-based rationale. The state treated claims of occult power as potential consumer fraud. Everyone is guilty of an indictable offense who pretends to exercise or to use any kind of witchcraft, sorcery, enchantment, or conjuration. Note, the law did not criminalize actual witchcraft, only the pretense of it, especially when money or gain was involved. This law took hold in 1919 with the arrest of Maggie Pollock. Maggie Pollock, born in 1879, was a farm housekeeper living near Blythe, Ontario. Known locally as the Seeress of Blythe, she claimed to possess a peculiar occult gift, the ability to communicate with the spirits and use second sight to find lost or stolen property. Unlike the colonial accused who were often marginalized, Maggie was a respected local figure. People traveled from across the province and sometimes beyond to seek her guidance, often offering a small gratuity of about 50 cents for her services. She never guaranteed results, insisted her abilities were a God-given gift and not the product of trickery or occult science. The controversy began on June 30th, 1919, when Maggie was arrested under Section 365 of the Criminal Code. The immediate trigger for the charge was an overzealous local constable who, with the backing of farmer John Linehart, accused Maggie of taking 50 cents to locate stolen oats. The court essentially had to determine whether Maggie was genuinely in league with the devil or merely pretending to be. Maggie was tried in Goderich Court. Her trial was reported across the country, highlighting the bizarre spectacle of a witchcraft trial. Her defense counsel, Mr. C. Garrow, argued that she was a sincere person who genuinely believed in her gift. Neighbors, like Mrs. Sinclair, testified on Maggie's behalf, detailing how the seeress had successfully helped her find a lost diamond ring by consulting with the spirit of Sinclair's deceased mother. Despite the community support and the absurdity of this charge in the 20th century, the court focused on the fraudulently pretends clause. On October 13, 1920, Maggie Pollock was convicted of unlawfully pretending to use an occult and crafty science to find the stolen grain. Maggie was sentenced, but her punishment was highly symbolic and reflected the judiciary's discomfort with the archaic law. She avoided jail time, which could have been up to 2 years, but was required to post a $200 bond and was admonished to cease all practices of occult science and pretending to use occult power. Despite the court order, Maggie Pollock reportedly continued to use her gift to help community members, occasionally even assisting local police in locating missing persons until her death in 1931. Over time, Parliament and courts recognized that the real concern was more about fraud than genuine belief in witchcraft, and by 1955, the law read, "Everyone who fraudulently A. pretends to exercise or to use any kind of witchcraft, sorcery, enchantment, or conjuration, B. undertakes for all consideration to tell fortunes, or C. pretends from his skill in or knowledge of an occult or crafty science, is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction." While Maggie Pollock's case happened over 100 years ago, don't think that it was the last one. In October 2018, 2 arrests were made under Section 365 of Canada's Criminal Code pertaining to witchcraft. In 2018, Dory Stevenson operated a business in Milton, Ontario, under the name Milton Psychic, using the alias Medina. She offered various readings including tarot, energy, and crystal readings, sometimes charging up to $130 for 2 sessions, and offering services like reuniting the separated and removing the evil forces from clients' lives. The dramatic shift from historical persecution to modern fraud became the central focus of her case. Police investigations revealed that Stevenson allegedly manipulated clients during vulnerable periods, convincing victims that something terrible would happen to them unless they remitted cash or purchased expensive items for cleansing. Following a 5-month investigation, the Halton Regional Police Service arrested Stevenson on the 19th of October 2018. The charges laid against her were highly publicized and drew national attention. She was charged with fraud over $5,000 for allegedly defrauding victims over $60,000 through manipulation and false promises, extortion for pressuring victims to hand over cash, and witchcraft for fraudulently pretending to tell fortunes. Police alleged that the fraud involved deceiving victims into buying new cell phones, jewelry, appliances, and gift cards, which they were instructed to hand over to Stevenson for a supposed cleansing ritual. These items were never returned. The case of Samantha Stevenson, known by the alias Ivana Lopez, represents one of the most egregious cases of elder financial abuse tied to the witchcraft law. The deception began around 2014 when the victim, a vulnerable 67-year-old man from Vaughan, Ontario, sought guidance from the self-proclaimed psychic. Over a period of approximately 4 years, the dramatic manipulation unfolded. Ivana convinced the man that a dreadful presence had settled into his life, warning him that his home and very future were plagued by evil spirits that needed immediate and extreme intervention. The demands escalated far beyond typical psychic fees, culminating in a devastating request. To rid himself of the menacing spirits, the victim was allegedly convinced by Stevenson to sell his primary residence and transfer the entire proceeds of the sale, a sum exceeding $600,000, to her personal account. She promised to hold the money in trust, claiming it was necessary to keep the funds safe and blessed until the spiritual cleansing was complete. Even when the victim was financially destitute, the demands did not cease. Stevenson then requested an additional $6,000 in cash, which she claimed she would burn in a final fiery ward against the spirits. Desperate and completely manipulated, the elderly man sold his car and maxed out his credit cards to comply with this chilling instruction. The investigation by the York Regional Police culminated in the arrest of Samantha Stevenson in October 2018. She was charged with fraud over $5,000, for defrauding the victim of more than $600,000, possession of property obtained by crime relating to the vast sums of money and assets taken, and pretending to practice witchcraft. The sensational nature and immense financial damage of the Samantha Stevenson case, occurring concurrently with the aforementioned Dory Stevenson case, served as a powerful impetus to eliminate the antiquated statute. The arrests highlighted that the witchcraft charge was merely a legal vestige being used to underscore the fraudulent nature of a crime. Just 2 months later, in December 2018, Bill C-51 became law, repealing Section 365 and removing the act of fraudulently pretending to practice witchcraft from the Canadian Criminal Code. This ended the legal centuries-old concept of prosecuting witchcraft in Canada that had stretched from the colonial period to the modern digital age. For generations, whispers of witchcraft drifted through the colonies of New France and Acadia and into our modern times. This brief journey has only lifted a small corner of the veil that shrouds those forgotten trials, but I hope it's offered a clearer glimpse into how fear, faith, and law have shaped Canada. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, there are a few things that you can do to support our channel. Give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and leave a comment. Please consider giving us a super thanks on YouTube or buy us a coffee so we can continue bringing you interesting Canadian content. Let us know if there's a Canadian story you would like us to cover in a future episode. For more videos about Canada, please subscribe and ring the bell icon to be notified of our next video upload.